Well, I guess this is a trilogy. Welcome to part 3 of said trilogy, where we are examining the progression of Snow White from the compilation that the Brothers Grimm did in 1812 and 1819 to the animated version that Walt did in 1937 to the live action CG hybrid that Disney did just recently here in 2025. The first one we focused on the actual story of the original and how that was put together and the elements of that. We actually did a reading of the whole story. The second one was comparing that story with what we know of from the animated version of 1937. And then we're going to be looking at how that one has changed and evolved into 2025. One of the key things I mentioned, or not key things, but one of the things I mentioned in the first video is I wondered if there was a missing link. If there was something that came between 1812 or 1819 and 1937. It's a pretty long time to have gone without any changes. And the changes are pretty significant. It changes from a almost focusing on the queen and her evil and her wickedness, her envy, her pride, and her vanity. It shifts from that, where she has a more prominent role. She actually tries to kill Snow White 3 different times. And it also ends, the whole story ends with her being tortured to death. It shifts it from a cautionary tale of evil to a triumph and a celebration of innocence, goodness, and love in the Disney version. The prince, who shows up at the tail end of the fairy tale, kind of out of the blue, is replaced or is given an introduction in the Disney version. So that love is made more, not central, because it's just a very quick, hey, I love you and I love you. He comes in and it's like, hey, she's like, she says, what is it? I hope the man who I love finds me today. And he's watching her say that. And he's like, well, bam, here I am. I've got one love only for you. And, they have the little back and forth, a very brief microcosm of the dynamics, relational dynamics between a man and a woman. And it ends with them essentially going, oh, I kind of like you. I kind of like you. And that lays a foundation that gives Snow White kind of a protagonist bent, where we know that we want to see that love realized. Whereas in the original, because it's more focused on the queen, you're not really, it seems like the true love is kind of a tack on at the end, or finding love is a tack on at the end. Whereas it's kind of the underlying, you're wanting to see that completion of her with the prince. And now, instead of being the protagonist, advancing her own machinations, which she still kind of does, the queen is now kind of the antagonist trying to stop that. She does see in that film we saw, she sees Snow White and the prince, making eyes at each other. And even though she's killing Snow White out of envy because of her beauty, it's also, it makes it more of a poignant thing. Like, I'm doing this to kill or to stop this love. It kind of makes it a dual purpose killing. And so we saw those differences. There were some other ones as well. Snow White in the original is 7 years old when it first starts. And then when she becomes comatose or dies, however you want to look at it, it's a very bizarre, she's not dead, not undead, and not living, but she's not decomposing. It's weird, but it's a long time had passed. And so we assume that she was now, many years had passed and she was now a teenager of some kind. We know, back in the 1800s, marriage happened at an earlier age, but still not 7 years old. So there was probably still some time. Whereas in this one, in Walt Disney's, of course, we know, she was more of a teenager at that point all the way through. And that allows the prince to come in earlier and it not be weird. And I hate to say that word, especially in context of this, because, it's become quite a meme at this point, a well-known meme. But anyway, that's just to kind of summarize it. There were differences, but the missing link. So I looked up, why did Walt Disney choose Snow White? Because it is a quick story. If you look at the actual fairy tale, like most fairy tales, it's not incredibly long or robust. The Little Mermaid actually is far, far longer. It's probably 2 or 3 times as long, the original Hans Christian Andersen version. So it's a very short story. And as I said, it's kind of a cautionary tale against wickedness. It's kind of morbid in a lot of ways. So why choose that to adapt? And it really comes down to, he saw he saw a 1916 movie of it. And I'll pull that up here. Not the movie, the whole thing, but this is it right here. 1916 Snow White. Pretty much the same synopsis. I tried to find a little more details on the plot, like how much it varied. But as you can see, Snow White is, she's a young woman. She's probably not as young as she is in the animated version. But in this one, as it says here, They carry her body, Snow White's body. The prince and the dwarves carry Snow White's body to the castle and accuse the queen of harming her. At the castle, a piece of the apple pops out of Snow White's throat and she revives. That sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of what happens in the original too. The guys carrying her coffin stumble, and that stumbling dislodges the piece of the apple from her throat and throws it out. Or in the 1912 version, the 1812 version, I'm sorry, the one of the guys who has to carry the coffin around gets sick of carrying the coffin around and actually strikes Snow White and causes the dislodging. They updated that from 1812 to the 1819 version and made it just the stumbling of the coffin, which is still silly, but at least it's not abusive and kind of spiteful. But here we have a completely different scenario where the evil queen loses her beauty after Snow White is revived. The little piece of apple comes out of her throat. The evil queen loses her beauty and goes away in shame. Snow White and the prince plan to marry and jointly rule their kingdom. And that is a particular point in the original as well. Snow White isn't worried about the kingdom that her stepmother ruled. She is going to become a queen of a completely different kingdom with the prince. And I think it's alluded to that the prince he refers to it as his father's castle. So in theory, his father is still alive, but he is soon to be the king and she will become the queen. So she's going to rule in this new land, free from the taint of her stepmother's cruelty and malice and whatever evil that has wrought. And so they kind of have that same ending here in 1916. And you can see here, oops, that's not it. I don't want to leave this up there too long because I don't know how YouTube will handle the video, but you can see the parallels between the 1916 version, and you see it in these different colors. Apparently it's very hard to find it restored, but you can see very quickly that there are these, not shot for shot, but a lot of things, like even with her talking with a bird. So there is, as I suspected, there was a missing link from between the original story and what Walt ended up doing. He was inspired at the age of 15, apparently, by watching that 1916 version in the theater, and that is what kind of drove him to go, okay, I want to remake that in this way. And the reason why I talk about all this is, why make a remake? Why do we make remakes? I don't want to go on a huge deep dive of it, but usually it's because you have something new to offer. In theory, in the same vein of the story, like you want to extrapolate, you want to expand upon, elaborate upon, or enrich the original story with new technology, with a new angle. And there have been, I didn't go into them very much. I never watched them, but there have been Snow White adjacent stories or stories about Snow White. I think Mirror Mirror is one of them. There are other versions that kind of have a little more of a modern take to them. But again, they're not called Snow White. They're called Mirror Mirror. They're called, I don't know what the other one's called, but I should have done a little more research. Shame on me. But they're supposed to be kind of like alternative takes on it, not updates of the actual story. If you're going to update the actual story, take Snow White and make it Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, because I'm pretty sure that was it, right? It was only called, it was just called Snow White. So Walt took it from Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, or Snow White to Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. And it's like, well, why do that? Because through animation, he could do things that were not possible back then. I mean, aside from the color part, it was being able to animate the dwarves or show the dwarves probably in a more convincing way than they were done in the 1916 version. The animals, the interaction with the animals becomes much more believable and easy. I mean, now we've got CG, but back then, you have mechanical birds, you have maybe trained birds, but it's not going to have the same effect. So I think he saw the potential, saw the beauty of the story, because it had been updated from the original 1812 version, 1919 version. He saw an updated version of that, and I think that's more or less what he adapted, not the original story. And I think, to his credit, or to the point of the whole thing, he was able to give us with a more palatable version, not only because the 1916 version is either, I think they thought it was lost in a fire, but then it got repaired, but it's very, very hard to come by. I think it was originally in Dutch, in terms of the nationality and everything. So it made it more accessible. But I think it was able to elaborate on those elements in a more, I hate to say a realistic way, but a more realized way. It's like you don't see the makeup and the things holding the beards on. You don't see the fact that the bird is just I'm assuming it was just a stuffed animal or something. In other words, we know it was not some mechanically complex creature. We would have heard about that. It was probably a very obvious prop. And so he's like, I can bring that to life with color, with vibrance, with music, with all these different elements. And so you say, okay, this is going to be an improvement on that in many ways, but still keeping the nature of the story. And even though the love element is embellished a little bit in that, in the original story, we only get the love at the very end. We get the prince showing up at the very end. We don't get him at the beginning. We now get that in Disney's version, but to me, that is a natural, that goes with the grain, if you will. If you think about a piece of wood, you got the grain going, it goes with the grain. The love story, the love element was already there. The story was already there. He just, and I don't know if it was in the 1916 version or not, but whether it was started there or that the inception was there, it became something that he focused on to give Snow White, as an extension of Snow White, of this innocent, kind, beautiful, incredibly beautiful. Everybody apparently, I mean, the Mirror says she's 1,000 times more beautiful than the Queen in the original 1819 version. So it broadens that a little bit, and it doesn't go too far. It was only, I think it was 80 minutes. I think the 1916 was 60 minutes. So it's both feature length, but only added another 20 minutes of runtime onto it, but just fleshed it out a little bit more. And I think it was a natural progression of it into what it became. It took out some stuff that might have been even more disturbing to children and would have been terrifying and would not have looked right animated, and instead filled it with dance numbers and showing multiple birds, critters on the screen, which would have been, because one thing to have an animated character talking to another one almost static and just maybe gesturing with their arms. It's another thing to show all these birds and all these creatures of the forest running around and just giving it so much life. So it was very much a way to showcase the medium and sell it to an audience as, hey, this is another art form we can have. These don't just have to be 2-minute, as animated cartoon strips. These can actually be feature length, engaging, something that pulls on your heartstrings and draws you in. So I think he chose it because it is a streamlined story. It would be something relatively easy to tell, and it would do a nice job of showcasing the medium, the art, the animation that he wanted to do. So you understand the motivation for that. Now the question becomes 2025 or 2022, I think when the idea to update it came out. Why? What was going to be offered? What could this 2025 version offer that was not done in 1937? Because with animation, you can, part of the perk of it is you can do, especially back before CG came along, CGI, what have you, you could do infinitely more. The sky's the limit. If you could draw it and make it move, you could have it in your movie. Whereas live action, you had to make it. It was all practical effects. Even if you wanted to do an illusion, you still had to make the equipment to portray the illusion. So it was a lot more confined, and animation allowed it to spread out, to become so in theory 1937 Snow White has as much as you can possibly put it. It is a fully animated feature. There's really nothing more you're going to add on in a visual way. So, but you can see behind me here, I mean, as a still shot, you look at it and go, okay, it's the idea of kind of, I mean, you're going back to its roots. You're taking it started off, or at least for Walt, it started off 1916 as an actual real movie. He elaborated on it, expanded on it, and I would say elevated it in the animated version. Now say, okay, let's go back and try to make the live action more realistic by now incorporating computer generated animation instead of actual animation to make it, I guess, come to life more, to make it more realized. And I see a value for that. I see the appeal, at least, I mean, conceptually. Like, I wouldn't mind like seeing a short of something. Like I've seen, like not the 1989, I think it was 1992 or something, the Mario Brothers movie. That's not realizing Mario. Neither is the animated Mario that came out. That's animated. That's CG. I've seen like shorts, or I've seen pictures anyway, and I wish I could bring them up here, but you don't care about Mario, but seeing what Mario would look like in real life. And it's an interesting thing to look at, but I don't know that it warrants a, fleshing out. Like what more are you adding to the story by, or what new things are you able to show? Now, if this was, let's say we didn't have movies like The Matrix, we didn't have movies that really employed a lot of CG. Let's say it was just kind of an obscure or very niche type thing. And this was the first real application of merging computer generated with real life actors, a la Roger Rabbit, just with CG. Then I can understand it going, hey, just like Walt Disney used Snow White to showcase his animation, we are going to use Snow White, an updated version, to showcase this new animation, this new CG animation. But we're way beyond that. We've done all the mixing. We've had completely CG. We've had partially CG. We've had all the things. So this is not a showcase for it. And so, okay, so why do this remake? And I'm isolated this year, understanding that Disney has been doing live action remakes a long time, for a while now, going back. I think they started with Cinderella maybe, and then they've done Lion King and everything. But it begs the question, why? Like, what are you adding to it to justify doing that? Other than, like I said, for me personally, I find it to be a cool image. I find if you wanted to do like a 2-minute short and be like, oh, that's cool. That's kind of what the Lion King would look like in real life. Or that's how, the genie and Aladdin or, Snow White would look. That's fine. But to do a feature length film, it's like, well, why, what's the driving force? What's the inspiration for that? And I'm not gonna say it's the 2025 version is deprived of inspiration, but I will say I have not seen the whole thing. That's why I'm not, going definitive with it. I have watched many videos that have shown clips of it. I have gotten the story synopsis from multiple sources, some that are praising it, some that are not so praising. And so you know the bones of the plot. You know what the script is. You know what the elements are, what's been replaced, what's been what's been substituted in, what's been factored in, and you've been able to see in plenty of the trailers and everything what they've done with the dwarves, what they've done with the animals and everything. Like you can see it all. I don't necessarily have the full picture, but an understanding of what was done. And again, as kind of a novelty thing, but I would say in many ways, it's kind of going to be a step back automatically, because you've taken it from a medium that had infinite ways to express it. And now you're going, okay, well, we still have to make her dress, which, looking at the image there, it's more vibrant than the original, but it looks more like a costume. And again, I don't want to nitpick the visuals, because that's not really what this is about. But just the idea of, why are we making this remake? What are we getting? What are we bringing to the proverbial table with this? And I honestly don't see it. I don't see the need, or the spectacle even isn't really there, because this isn't a new medium or a new way of doing things. Exactly. Or at least I would say, I would hope not. So then the question becomes, well, what was changed in the narrative then? What was changed for the character? And this is where it is going to be opinionated. I'm not, like, as I said in the first one, I made a disclaimer. I did not make these videos to rag on this movie. It's the actors, anything. This is not I'm going to do a review and either roast it or praise it. I'm looking at it as a more objective, going, okay, we have the first piece. We know where the story started. We saw the middle, 1937, how it was adapted, how it was changed for that time. And not even for that time, it was changed for the medium. And that's another point. When you adapt something from a story, black and white, letters, as you saw in the first one, just on a story, you adapt it to a film, you are going to make changes. You should make changes. Lord of the Rings is a perfect example of that. I don't know that I agree with all the changes or that all the changes were necessary, but you have to understand that going from a book to a screen, you are going to have to change it. And then you have your goal. Okay, well, not only are we bringing this to life on screen, but I'm trying to showcase this animation. I'm going to do things that blow your mind, things that we probably wouldn't be able to do realistically or make it look good on a soundstage. The dwarves in their cave, and when they're doing the mining and everything, and they're doing the marching, and just a lot of the visuals we get in the animated version back in those days, trying to get a live action version of that probably wouldn't have looked as good. So you understand the reasoning for why certain changes were made in the adaptation, but it wasn't like it dated. It was dated. It took it from, again, what the purpose of the Brother Grimm stories and a lot of fairy tales are again, more cautionary, they're more espousing the detriment and the downfall of evil almost just as much, if not more so, than lifting up the good. It's more about stay away from evil. Don't be this. Don't let yourself go that way, versus saying, hey, look at this awesome stuff over here. But, Disney making this film that in theory would also reach children is going to change it. And there are some things that I said that still to me are still very mysterious as to why they were in the original. Now, I'm sure with context, historical context, for the people who wrote it, of the time it was written, they make more sense. But a lot of them are still very enigmatic, don't quite understand. Most of those were taken out. The fate of why was it heated iron shoes that the queen was made to dance in until she dropped dead? Why not just behead her? Why not just lock her in a dungeon? Why did she go to Snow White's wedding? She got invited. She talked to the mirror. She knew Snow White was still alive. She knew Snow White knew that she had tried to kill her multiple times. What did she think was going to happen when she went to their wedding? Like, it's kind of it doesn't make a lot of sense. Narratively, doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, the prince just kind of showing up at the, I don't know what, when the prince just shows up, it's kind of coming out of left field, it's the prince. It doesn't really feel organic to the story. It's almost there just to kind of give, because he doesn't kiss her. In the original, he does not kiss her. In the 19 version, there is no kiss. It's, the apple is dislodged in a very goofy way. I think I mentioned that already. But Walt chose to take that romantic element at the end of them falling in love with each other very swiftly and abruptly, and chose to give it more substance in the next one. So he took something that already existed and decided to make it more central or more organic to the story and more of a driving force, and a beautiful way to bookend the story, because the original book ends with mother going, I want a child who looks like, white, black, and red. What's white and black and red all over? I want a child like that, and ends with the stepmother being tortured to death. Not, maybe not the greatest narrative. It's not a great movie outline. You got to make some changes. And so I'm guessing the 1916 did. Well, we heard how it changed a little bit. The queen doesn't get tortured to death, but she loses her beauty somehow because apple out of the mouth. So I'm saying that, I'll say, when you look back at it, you go, there are some narrative potholes. There are some very bizarre things that may have been less bizarre at the time, but those have aged out. We no longer have those truths. We no longer have those ways of looking at things in terms of their representation. I mentioned that it specifically, the story says that Snow White, after she died, that animals visited, and then it specifies an owl, a raven, and a dove in that order. What's the significance of those? Why were those there? It seems like they were put there for a reason, but it hasn't gone. And just think about like a lot of our sayings that we have now. I was one left holding the bag, something like that. Well, we use it. We know why we use it. We know what it means, but we don't know where it came from, the etymology of the word. So there's a lot of phrases that they're not dated. They're not old fashioned. We simply no longer have the reference, the convergence of factors that brought that saying into prominence no longer exist, because society's kind of grown out of that. Those elements are no longer used. We literally have moved on from that. And so all we're left is with the saying that, if you really think about it, doesn't seem to mean what it, like, I was the one left holding the bag. Okay. What's worse about holding a bag and holding, a mouse, or holding a dongle? Like, why is being left holding the bag a bad thing? Well, we know what it means. It means, kind of being left high and dry, but what's the source of that? The point being, there are things that age because they become obscure and no longer resonate with people. And I think there were a lot of pieces of that original story that kind of fell into those gaps. But love, the desire of both a man and woman to find love, a man's desire to pursue and to discover and to rescue, to be of help, to protect, that's not antiquated. That's not something that doesn't exist anymore or shouldn't exist anymore. That's not an obscure thing. That is a fundamental truth of what it means to be a man, that particular aspect of a woman desiring to be loved, desiring to be cherished, wanting to spend her life with somebody. That's not going to become obsolete. That's not just something that women are going to stop caring about. And the day that men and women stop caring about that is we're within 2 or 3 generations. I don't know how long it would take for the humanity to go away. Like, humanity exists and continues to exist because, in theory, you've got men and women coming together, creating a family, raising a family, and then that family raising other ones and going on and so forth, in which the intimacy, the physical intimacy is a part, the relational intimacy is needed to show the kids, to demonstrate the different aspects of a relationship and how a correct one should function so that they know what to look for as they move on and as they grow in other aspects of their lives, and so on and so forth. You take that away, humanity just goes. So we're never, from a pure survival standpoint, we should not be getting away from that. From a successful survival, you can survive and be absolutely miserable. If you just want to, it's like, okay, we're gonna boil it down to insemination or whatever. It's just there's going to be no love, no relationship. We need to crank out more. We'll clone them, for crying out loud. We just need to crank out more people so that the human race doesn't expire. That is surviving, but it's doing it in a really crappy way, and a really morbid and just dystopian and ugly way. So in order to continue to move forward with humanity, we need that. There needs to be that. And I'm not talking like we need to be romantic and, oh my gosh, I love this and all lovey-dovey and whatever. That is an inception. That's part of what gets you into the relationship. But then after that, it is a normal relationship. You have that love and it knits you together and you move forward. So you don't want to fixate on love, like in rom-coms, where it's just like, it's all about that love story. And then you're like, you know what, as soon as the credits stop rolling at the end, like we see them together. Oh, that's nice. And you're like, based on his dysfunction and her dysfunction and the lies and the trickery and the manipulation they use to get together and all this kind of stuff, I don't think they're still together by the time the credits are done rolling. Like it just, you don't believe it. And I've been a sucker. I'll admit, I've been a sucker for a lot of rom-coms. I still like, movies like Jerry Maguire, Notting Hill to a degree. But I used to like them in general, and I've slowly moved away from them because I do see that. I'm like, these are just ways to contrive to get people together, but you don't believe for a second that they're actually going to stay together because there's not a lot of substance behind it, and it's hard to do that within 2 hours. But I think it is. I believe it's true that's never going to go out of style. That's never going to be outdated. The idea of men and women in relationship, of men desiring to be with women, the man desiring to be with a woman. It keeps sounding like I'm saying sex, but for men and women to be together and to want that love and to want that relationship, to say that that's outdated or to infer that that's outdated is a very bizarre thing to me. So I don't think, especially when the original story has that as part and Disney grew that a little bit more, to me, the next logical step, if you're going to take that story and say, okay, you know what, we're going to give it some more chops, because that is one thing when you bring something that's animated into the real world per se, like let's just say that there was a lot more practical effects in Snow White 2025 than this hybrid. The benefit of that is it makes it literally more realized. You're actually seeing this play out, how it would play out in real life, how it would look, how Snow White would look, the interactions, and it adds more gravitas. Like I mentioned, I got a little misty at the very end when the prince, sees Snow White and he's singing the song that he sang before. But when he was singing it before, he was a proclamation of love. And when he's singing it at the end, it's a slower, more mournful kind of in memoriam of that love. And it kind of gets you. So you can be moved to emotion through animation. But I think live action can add on to that, can make that even more so. I'm thinking the natural progression, going with the grain of the original 2 stories, you go, okay, we fleshed out the love story a little bit more in the Disney in the 37 version. In this one, it would be even more so. Maybe we'd have a better understanding of who the prince is, where he comes from, a little bit. I'm not saying go into his backstory. We don't need to know all the history, but like, at least give him a reason for why he's coming by the palace, the courtyard of the palace when he does. Give that a little more time to breathe. Have there be more moments and make it more of an understanding that the queen is the one severing this, that maybe she was always jealous, but what prompts her to send Snow White away is seeing her having this progress with this prince. And you can flesh out the queen a little bit more as well. Go back to what you had in the original story, where it was a little more focused, where it detailed her being eaten up by envy and by vanity and by pride, and flesh her out more, and incorporate that cautionary aspect of it, and maybe make it subtle. Maybe show her interacting with Snow White initially, before, and that would be the key. Show her going to the mirror and saying, mirror, mirror, who's the fairest in the land? And he's like, or who's the fairest of them all? And he says, you are. And her, being kind to either her daughter or her stepdaughter, depending which version you go. I think stepdaughter is better than mother, just because the idea that a mother would do that to her daughter is creepy. Like even more so than a stepdaughter or stepmother. Show that, and then show how that turns. Like, you could do this in 2 minutes max, maybe even a minute, but where you essentially show that darkening of her heart and the hardening of her heart towards her stepdaughter, when she's no longer the fairest. When she's the fairest, everything's honky-dory. Everything's fine. Oh, I love you. Oh, yes, Noah, you're so awesome. You're so beautiful. Oh, you're so... But, and make her pleasant. Make her look pleasant, because evil can look pleasant. When evil's happy, evil looks fine. Evil's great. It's when evil when evil doesn't like what's being done, and that's when the evil actually comes out, when it manifests. And so you see that turn when the mirror says, oh, it's Snow White. And in the original, it's funny because I mentioned the mirror says, she's 1,000 times more beautiful than you. It's like, oh my gosh, dude, seriously? Like, you could just say you run a close second, queen, but your stepdaughter's, she's taken after her father's footsteps, but he's awesome because of you, so kind of taken after you. It's fine. Like, he could have tried to ease it over, but the mirror's like, no, she's 1,000 times prettier than you, and that just sets her off, kind of understandably. And then show that transformation, show that turning, and maybe a gradual thing, because in the original it talks about, like, it eats away at her more and more and more. So you can flesh that out a little bit more. Make her, she's still going to be a villain. We don't need to be sympathetic towards her exactly, or at all, really, because it's envy. But maybe you see initially she's trying to fight it. Like, she feels that, because you can understand, you feel animus towards something or someone, and like, I don't want to be angry at you. But if you don't find a way to shut it down, if you don't recognize that it's wrong to do that, and it's not a healthy way to be, you embellish it, you embrace it, and eventually you just get carried away by it. So to see, I guess, a little bit of tragedy, it wouldn't necessarily feel sorry for her, other than maybe initially when she's first starting to feel that, when you can see that the affection she has for her daughter or her stepdaughter is starting to be corrupted, and how she still wants to, like, maybe you see her when she, when Snow White's crying, she soothes her, she's like, oh, come here, she hugs her. And then after the revelation, you see her trying to embrace her, but she can't. She's like, she can't bring herself to do it. She's starting to already despise Snow White because of her envy. And so in that moment you're going, oh, you feel bad because she's warring with that. It's her ego, it's her pride, but she wants to love. And I'm not even sure that's true to the nature of the character, but I feel like you could do that. And again, you're tacking on a minute, 2 minutes here and there. So yeah, they'll probably push the runtime out to maybe an hour and a half, whatever. But if you're actually making the story more richer, and you're making the characters more involved and more dynamic, and you're showing them in a way that's like, oh my gosh, I never saw that before. It's like you want to do, if you have if you have a Photoshop image or something, and you crop in, and you're just focused on this little part, it can be kind of nice if you go, oh, let's see the bigger picture. Let's see everything that's around it. That was a weird example. I don't know why I went that direction, but you know what I mean? It's like you can pull it away and it's still the same image. You're just seeing a bigger picture. And I felt like that would be the natural thing. You're not going to contradict what was done in the 37 version. You're just going to expand on the different elements and make them a little more fleshed out. For excuse the pun. Well, I don't know if it's a pun, but it's no pun intended, or yeah, I guess no pun intended, because literally it's flesh. It's real people instead of these animated things. So you're fleshing it out both as a story, and you're fleshing out the characters as literally beings of flesh, as we humans are. I don't know why I'm talking like this. So you're adding on to those. You're adding on to the love story. You're giving that a little more, maybe a little more time to develop. And you are developing the queen a little bit more, and you're giving her a little bit of a tragic twist. And then you start, as the audience, you start to dislike her more as her envy and her spite to go to the foreground. So that is going to diminish the back end with the dwarves to a degree, but that's because we don't need like all the musical numbers. Now that is something to consider too. Obviously the 37 version was a musical. The original story, not a musical. The 37 version was. I don't remember how many songs are in there. I know there's the Someday My Prince Will Come, and then his version of that, but it's very short. And then there's Whistle While You Work. I mean, maybe there's 5 songs. I'd have to look that up. I should have done that beforehand. But it's not rife with musicals as far as I know. It's not without it, but it doesn't. It's not like a musical, like a stage play where it's like every 2 minutes you burst into song to talk about what was just done or what's going to happen or, you know, all the different reasons why you would burst into song on a stage production. So you would maybe minimize that or keep it at the same number. You wouldn't add more to it because you're not, it's a real movie, not an animation. I think musicals are easy to handle in animation, easier to watch in an animation because you're usually seeing a lot of cool stuff. Like think of like Aladdin, you know, as a, make way for Prince Ali. You know, you got all these visuals going on, all these goofy little references and cool little deals. It's a very entertaining thing to watch as you're hearing the music. Aladdin being chased through the streets of Agrabah. If you're going to have a song of decent length, there's got to be stuff going on. The dwarves doing their Whistle While You Work. That was good. Then we've come quite a distance away from that being like, whoa, like look what we're watching. We're just watching these drawings move in such a convincing way and doing these things. So you don't necessarily need to spend as much time with Snow White cleaning the house or cleaning the cottage or the dwarves doing that. You can still do the hi-ho number, but we don't have to focus on that as much. And then you come back to, you know, the queen and her actions and how all that stuff happens. And then, you know, anyway, like, I mean, but I think that's enough. That is enough to add to the runtime, to add to the dynamics, to bring it more. And honestly, like when I was watching that final scene from Snow White, where the prince comes up and he sees her in this glass coffin, and just imagine seeing that in real life, seeing a real character. Because in it, I will say that is the one quote unquote dated thing about the animation. It was rotoscoped, I believe, almost exclusive entirely, where they essentially animated over people moving, and they move very much like stage care. A lot of it very dramatic, very, you know, big things. And so he would put his hat like this and he would step away like this. It's fine. It's product of the times. That is a product of the times. But so it's kind of funny that, you know, it's a little more dramatic or whatever. So to see that done, but more realistically, and see the heartbreak, because even with the 37 version, even though it's hard to believe, even though you go, okay, this is really a truncated timeline here of this love story. We get the entire arc of this love story within, you know, 70 seconds or so. It's still, his earnestness is there. His purity, his desire, his saying, one love, I have but one love and it's only for you. And her, you know, rejoining that, her, you know, her reciprocating that, and her kind of coming out to him on the balcony and them having a moment. That's enough of a foundation that when he comes in after, you know how much he cared about her. And I did check. It is the same song. I think it's the same lyrics from what I can hear. And it's interesting because in the original, or at the beginning, she's singing, I'm wishing, you know, for the one I love to find me today. And then he comes in and sings his part. At the end, he comes in singing his part, and then it goes into her part. Now, of course, she's not singing, she's laying there, but it's the melody, the sound of it. So it's a nice way to bookend the story. And then I think it keeps her song into, you know, through to the credits. It's just a very, very, very beautiful way to do that. But just imagining him, like the emotion, you get a good actor, you'd have to have the chops. You get a good actor, but just this is the one you love. This is who you wanted to be with, and you were coming together, and this was your princess. This was going to be the light of your life, like everything. And now she's dead, but not dead and buried. Like she's not out of sight, out of mind. She's in this weird state where she can't hug you. She can't reciprocate. She can't do anything. She can't interact with you. There is no relationship there, but she's not gone. You know, she still has color in her cheeks. She's not decomposed. She's alive, but not breathing. She's there, and not just, and that how that would feel, how that would be to come across, have that as a reality where you can reach out and touch her and her skin's not going to be clammy and cold or, crumble away at your touch, but yet she's so close, but yet she's not, she won't respond to you. She won't. And so, and just that trembling that would be there of him just kind of leaning over in the saying goodbye. Like it's not like he was told, a love's true kiss will waken her from her sleep. The prince had really no reason to kiss other than like you're saying goodbye to somebody, which, at a grave, we would just say, goodbye because the person's dead and buried. And again, a dead body is a dead body. Snow White's not a dead body. She is, again, it's this weird state where she's not really dead, but she's not alive. And so it's a very tender, simple gesture of just saying goodbye to the love of his life. And in the movie, he kind of hangs his head, but you could just imagine him like kissing and just trembling and just kind of like breaking down and just trying to, kind of like kneeling beside her. Just imagine, I'm just like a regular, scene in a movie where somebody goes to somebody's grave, a guy or a gal goes to the grave and they start talking, and then you see them overcome with the emotion. They just kind of break down and they break down, in terms of crying, and then they break down physically where they end up on their knees or hunched over because it just takes all the life out of them. And so to be able to see that scene, give it a little more time to breathe and give that moment so much more gravitas. You wouldn't have a dry eye in the theater. If it's done right, that would just hit you right here as a guy, like the guys are going, I mean, I'm not saying all the guys would be out there watching it. I probably still wouldn't have watched it either, I don't think, unless it got really good reviews. But, as a guy, you're going like, if you've lost somebody, or even if you just loved, lost or loved, you know that pain, that yearning and that desire, it hits you there. For a woman, to see that kind of love for you, how much you were loved and cherished, and to have that understanding and that connection, to see that, I think it would have been a very emotionally compelling moment, and then to have her wake up. Now, of course, as the current audience, we would know what's coming, so we're not. There's a level of detachment, but again, when it's done well, because most movies we know that. Beauty and the Beast, whatever. We know they're going to end up together at the end. However that has to happen, they're going to become together at the end. It's no surprise there, but it still doesn't mean that you don't experience emotions on the way to that point. And so to see that happen and then have her waking up, and you could do that in so many different ways. And it would be so fun to, okay, what's going to be the most celebratory? Like, how is that going to go? But, in terms of uplifting, the music, what are we going to play? How is that going to factor in? How is she going to respond to him? All of that. So, but to me, all of that is amazing stuff to explore, and a great way to realize it, flesh it out, and make it the bigger picture, the more realized version of the 1937 movie. And it doesn't, I hate to use the word, but it's organic to what the story was once you shift the focus from the evil queen. So that's what I would think you would want to do. If you were going to do a remake, you're going to keep the name and say, we're updating this. You go, okay, let's see how awesome your animation is now. Let's see how the effects, the showcase of these effects are going to be. That's one part of it. And then how are you going to elaborate on the story as it is? Because you're not doing a revisionist thing where it's like, all right, now she's back with a vengeance. Like Mirror Mirror, I think they said, I've heard people say it's very similar in kind of approach, where it's Snow White's more like a warrior type deal, but that's not the original Snow White. There's no element of that in the original. And so, as many of you probably know, if you're interested in Snow White at all, you've probably seen a video, read an article or something about the new version. So instead of elaborating on the love story and making that more fleshed out, it's diminished. It's almost non-existent. The prince, a character of nobility, a character that Snow White would naturally feel, or could naturally feel. I know people are like, well, just because they have money, just because he's a prince doesn't mean he's a good guy. But the idea, at least as you see in the original, is an upstanding guy. He's not shady. He's not shifty. He doesn't have questionable integrity, at least outright. I mean, just as Snow White's a princess, he's a prince, and he's coming to her with something to offer. And at least in the 37 version, as he sees her, she's wearing peasant clothes. She's just the hired help as far as he knows, but he's still drawn to her. And I think there's like, and there's even a moment where after he says, like, he starts singing to her. Oh, I don't think he sings to her. He approaches her and says, well, hello. And she runs off, oh my gosh, and runs upstairs and hides behind the curtain. And she looks at her ensemble and is just like, oh, like she's just dismayed because she's wearing clogs and a crappy shirt, or these tattered robes. I should have kept the thing up there. I thought I was going to be shifting between things, but I also didn't think this was going to go for very long. So that just goes to show what I know. But she's kind of ashamed of that. And I think that's an awesome moment for him and his character to be like, it's not about you being royalty. I'm not even looking at that. I'm just saying you, and yeah, I'm a prince. I don't care. It's you. And it's just a great way it's just a very wholesome way to portray that love developing. So I think it would have been great. But to say, no, he's not a prince now, he's a thief. So we're taking somebody with integrity and taking somebody who has, at least in the fairy tale world, like in the real world, we hear all the time about princes, kings, whatever, doing some really crappy stuff. But in fairy tale world, unless you have pretty much two kinds of nobility, either the crazy crappy ones like the queen, or they're good. There's really not a lot of gray area in there in terms of moral compass. So he's a prince. He's obviously not the evil kind. So in that world, he is a good guy. We can understand that. We can default to expect that from him. If a guy's a thief, if he's a rebel, if he's, just out there doing stuff, it's you don't have that same assurance. It's a little stranger. Okay. And why would you do that? Now I'm going to try not to assume answers. I'm just going to put the question out there. What is the motive for taking, and better yet, what is the benefit to the story? How does the story benefit by making a prince into a thief? It's one thing to have something like, in Spaceballs, Lone Star thinks he's just kind of a bounty hunter, rogue guy, and comes to find out he's a prince. It changes his wardrobe, but, it fundamentally doesn't change him as a character. But the idea of a hidden nobility is one thing. But to just have it be a thief or a vagabond, what dimension does that add to the story? How does that benefit? It's a conscious decision, because what you have with many of these remakes, with many of these reboots and everything, you have the story already in front of you. You already have the characters, the appearance, everything is laid out for you. You just need to elaborate on it or change, if you elaborate on it, or, maybe update it or use new costume elements to make the dress look a certain way or whatever, to adapt it. You have to go out of your way. If a character behaves or is a certain thing, you have to they have to make a conscious decision. We're going to change that. Like, it's like, okay, you're sitting down in a meeting. You're going, okay, we got Snow White. What are the characters? We got Snow White, we got the queen, and we got the prince, and we got this. All right, let's just take these elements. Oh, no, wait. What? No, I don't think it should be a prince. What? Why not? I just think it should be a beggar or a thief or whatever. Why? We have the prince. We want to be trying to tell more of this story, not change it. Do you mean like he's going to be a bandit and then become a prince, or is he a bandit because he used to be a prince and he's forsaken that? Like, he's just a less reputable guy. He's kind of a turd muffin. Why are we doing that exactly? You got to ask these questions. When you go out of your way to change something in a remake, in a sequel, when you're making something with established characters, established world, going out of your way to change something, especially if it does not benefit or noticeably benefit the story in a way that justifies that kind of action, it shouldn't be done. So I'm not saying overtly. I don't know what the reasoning was. Maybe there was a great reason. I have not heard, as I've heard the story breakdown, I haven't heard a good reason other than that it ties into another change that they made, where in no version until this point in Snow White, aside from maybe these offshoots that aren't supposed to be Snow White, they're just using the characters, makes her into her needing to reclaim her kingdom, makes her into a leader or a revolutionary. I don't know exactly what words you would use because you're trying to overthrow the existing ruler. But that's not building off of anything in the story. There's not like a root of that or a seed of that in the story originally that you can say, okay, we're just going to grow that part out organically. We're going to broaden that part of the story. We're going to elaborate on that part of the story. That is something that has nothing to do with any element in Snow White that we can see in the original or in the 1937 version. That's not who Snow White is. That's not her desire. In the original, she's a 7-year-old who has to cope with all this horrible stuff happening, and her life is threatened and eventually put on hold for quite some time, and until she eventually comes out later. In the 37 movie, she's just very soft. She's very feminine. She's very I don't know. Just I'm trying to go in several different directions here, but there is a tenderness and a softness to her, and she doesn't have those ambitions. She's happy. She says, "Yeah, I'll clean the place." She's not like, "Okay, well, I'll do what I have to. I really wish I could go back and be the princess." She's just, okay, this is my life now, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a part of this little group. I mean, and I think we should all. I mean, I'm not saying that if you don't relate to this, you're a bad person, but we should all be able to relate to being times in our lives, seasons in our lives where we're not really advancing the plot. We're not really advancing the ball. We're not going anywhere with our lives. What is within our sphere is we happen to have a couple, I have these two friends with me right now, and that's the extent of really my relationships outside of my work, or I'm doing this job right now, which has me traveling around a lot, but that means I don't really get to spend any time with family, or like there's all different times in our lives where we are doing things that aren't amazing. And that's okay, because we can only do what's been put in front of us. And for Snow White, she doesn't need an action item, and I understand if you want to say, okay, she just sitting there waiting for the prince, but she wasn't. She was actively with the dwarves. And like I said, if you build up the story around it, you build on the front end and the back end, the love story, and you build more scenes with the queen in there, then you don't have this long period where Snow White's doing nothing. It's getting with the, spending time with the dwarves, getting to know them. It's, kind of living that life. You can cut away. Maybe the prince is going, "Hey, what happened to Snow White?" He's being told she's dead. Again, there's a way to make that love story more realized and more compelling. And that's already in the story. But so the idea that there needs to be more to that, I don't quite understand. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere. You could have just said, Snow White travels to America. Like she gets on a boat and is part of the group that discovers America, and she forages a path on the frontier. I mean, you could go anywhere with it. I mean, I don't know what America would look like back then. Of course, it wouldn't be America. It would be, I don't know what. Wait, no, 1776, 1812. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know how far back it was set when the story was in 1812. Anyway, bottom line, I'm not great with numbers. The fact is, you could just do anything. If you're not going to take elements that existed and expound on them, then you could just write whatever story you wanted, which is great creatively. But then why Snow White? Why revisit that story if you don't want to tell that story? If you want to make it about something else, you can have I think there even are stories of women or princesses who were ousted. What is it, Anastasia? I think that they did an animated movie, Anastasia, right? I can't remember if there's action in it. I remember seeing it, but it's I think it's like the revolution, and she's hiding from the stuff, but she's royalty, and then she comes back into it. Like you can do, I think there are plenty of stories out there of royalty or of a princess, or even just of a gal reclaiming something that was taken from her, or getting that back. That's never been the thrust of Snow White. That's not her character, and that's okay. Like, look, there are guys that are warriors. They're out there. They like, I don't know, okay, that was poorly articulated. I don't know where I'm going with this, but like I don't like going to a shooting range. I don't like the smell of gunpowder. I don't like the loud noises. It's just not a thing that I enjoy doing. I don't mind going archery shooting. It's nice and quiet. It's out there kind of in the middle of nowhere, but like I'm not a guy who's yearning for a fight. I don't like the idea of fighting. I don't like the idea of of being violent with somebody, even if I don't agree with them, or if I don't like something, or somebody makes fun of me. Violence is not the way I go. There are people, though, that are chomping at the bit, and there are situations, and there are many of them, I would say, and occupations where that kind of disposition is actually tends to be more of a good thing. You want people that are geared towards that. But even for guys, we can pursue, we can protect, we can provide, we can do a lot of things without actually being warriors. We're going out there with swords and fighting stuff. You can do that in a much more subdued or normal, I guess, mainstream way, which the mainstream's got a bad connotation, but you know what I'm saying? You don't have to go on some bold adventure. Just being in a relationship is more than enough of adventure for most of us, or surviving at your job or thriving at your job. Like, there's a lot of different things where you can take the spirit of that, but you're not the spirit of being bold, of being protective and everything. But you're not having to actually slay dragons and fight wars. And it's the same thing for women. And I would suggest that there are fewer women than men proportionally who have that go out and fight and protect and everything and do get the things done. I think that's a little less universal for women. And I could be wrong because I'm not a woman, but when I talk to women, the people that I've discussed with, they're not like, yeah, let's get out there. I mean, there's been discussions, regarding the types of jobs that men and women gravitate towards. And with men, it's more the high risk, high reward, the more dangerous jobs. Women like more stability. They like more flexible jobs that offer them, time to do things that they want to do and that have that are more stable. So your risk is a lot lower, but also your potential is a lot lower. And I don't know how prevalent that is. And there's nothing wrong with that. You need people in both jobs. And you're not going to tell somebody necessarily, oh, well, you're a man, so you should do this job. You're a woman, you do this job. But naturally, we're probably going to gravitate towards those things just as a natural tendency, just as we're very different. So the idea that, I think, but what that boils down to ultimately is I think you're going to find more resonance with a woman going, I want a peaceful life where I'm loved, I'm cherished, I'm protected, I'm taken care of, and I'm able to give, I'm able to nurture, I'm able to be a part of that life. Maybe there's a family involved, maybe not, depends on, a bunch of other factors, but in some way pursuing that relationship and walking through in a partnership with the man who I love, the man who captured my heart. And same thing with a man. It's like, I don't need to go out and slay stuff or whatever. I want to make a home for myself and for the woman I love. Those are more universal. Those are more fundamental. That's very basic survival. Like, you want to talk about jobs afterward. You want to talk about raising kids and everything that branches out from there. But the very fundamental part is not as a fear of being alone, but a desire to be with somebody. I feel like that is kind of hardwired in. Even somebody like me who was like, hey, I just haven't found it yet, may never find it, to be honest. But the desire is still there, the yearning to have that come together, and it naturally, I think, draws people together, and it should. Anyway, that's enough going off on that. My point is, I feel like the original, the 1937 version, tapped into a more, as I said, fundamental desire for both men and women, whereas. And it fits into the story of Snow White. And as I said, there are ways you can expand on that story and make it richer, but that is still at its heart. In the contrast, you have, I'm going to get with this scuzzy thief guy. I don't know how scuzzy he is. That much I don't know, like how awesome he is, how cool he is, how what he does to demonstrate any kind of affection. I don't know, but we're going to team up with him and apparently a set of bandits, and we're going to go overthrow a queen. And let's not to get too fine of a point here, but as I mentioned, there are things that don't make a lot of sense in the first, in the original version, the 1819 version. There are things where you go, that's kind of a head scratcher. That didn't make a lot of sense. And Walt cut it out. It's not in the 37 version. You go, okay, it makes sense because it didn't make sense. And so we seem to be kind of regressing because now we're going, okay, a 16-year-old girl and seven, I think there are. Well, you got your 7 dwarves and you got your 7 bandits. And then you've got, I think his name is Jonathan, the non-prince guy. That's 16 people, at least 8 of them of moderate stature, we'll say. None of them that we've really seen to be armed. Even in the 37 version, the dwarves didn't pull out a bunch of swords when they went after the queen. They went with sticks. So you're gonna overthrow a queen who, in theory, has an army, who has, significant. If she rules a realm, she's gonna have should have some arms and some armaments at her disposal. So with a ragtag group of folks who have no combat experience, as far as we can tell, she has no combat experience. And even if she did, you still have nothing in the numbers and you have no weapons. And you're going to go to the castle to overthrow that. That's something out of the original story. That's one of those things where you go, wait, so how is she going to pull that off? Like, how is that going to work? And from what I've heard of the story, the hoops that you need to jump through, the way that it's done is, I want to be fair because, I'm trying to think how many other movies or shows where you just go, okay, this is like, it's one thing to be up against the odds, like the rebellion against the Empire. Okay. They're outnumbered. They don't have the newest technology. They got the enemy. The Empire has a Death Star. They've got the resources. But the rebels do have fighters. They do have pilots. They do have a military. They do have a network. They do have resources that they can use to wage a guerrilla type war against the Empire. It's not, it makes them underdogs, but it doesn't strain credulity when they're actually able to pull it off. When you see how they do it, it's like, okay, you go up against a big battle station with a big battle station, David and Goliath type thing, big battle station. It's going to have very tiny weaknesses that tiny ships can get to. And so it's again, it's a David and Goliath, but it doesn't make you go, unlikely perhaps, but that's what makes it exciting. Snow White, the way the story is set up for the first half of the movie, which it more or less seems to be faithful to in terms of a setup, that doesn't lend itself to a revolution. It doesn't lend itself to a rebellion. And to have, I believe she identifies the guards by name. And I mean, there may be more to it than that, but I'm just going to say, regardless of what they did, like I said, I did not set out to critique or to bash on, to hate on, as people would say, even though there's no hate here. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. I'm not trying to rag on it. I'm just trying to conceptualize from a creative standpoint. If you're sitting down to write the script, like when you get to that point, you go, okay, how are we really realistically going to have this happen? Are we going to make it a bloody revolution? Are we actually have her running around with a rapier, like stabbing people? You killed my father, prepare to die. Like, is that what we're going to do here? Because you can go that way. I mean, other movies, the children's movie like Shrek and stuff have had, a little more of a violent climax, but it's not been real and it hasn't been bloody. And it's not a Disney movie, and it's not based on Snow White. So when you factor all those things in and go, okay, well, how you get to that point, and you hit a wall and go, we really can't pull this off. Like this is not going to work. This is not. I feel like we strayed away from the heart of Snow White. We strayed away from both elements, like the key elements of the first movie and the key elements of the original story, and the key elements that were expanded on in the 37 version. We're way out there with where we've taken this. Let's bring it back. Okay, what's the problem? Let's get back down to the fundamental things. What are we trying to talk about here? What are we trying to do? And as I said, I'm not gonna put thoughts in their heads or words in their mouths. I'm just going to say I don't see personally without. And if you go into a story, if you go into to write something and say, here's a list of the things that I want to see in this story. I actually had a friend back in college, my sophomore year. I had a friend back then. That was it. She knew a guy who had film equipment. We're talking back with like when DVD burners were just coming out, like the big ones, the standalone ones for like studios. He had just got one of those. He had some basic cameras. I remember that we made a boom mic. You have a boom pole and you put a shotgun mic at the end of it. And you use that for sound. We had to take a lavalier mic, stick it on the end of a broomstick, and tune the cable because he had lavaliers, but he didn't. The kind of work he didn't need a boom mic, so he didn't have one. So we had to make one. So it worked out okay. But anyway, the bottom line was, she came to my friend and I and said, "Hey, I know you guys do like writing and stuff." And he wants to be able to shoot like a fun video. He does wedding videos, or I think it was wedding videos. It's like he wants to do some fun stuff or a fun project. So would you guys write a short movie that we could shoot? And we were like, yeah, what do you want it to be? And she said, I want it to be, because these were the movies that were big at the time. I want it to have James Bond, Austin Powers, and Blair Witch Project. And we're like, okay. And so we wrote a movie, and oh boy, it comes up short. But I will say, I think we did a decent job, the best job, I think, reasonably so, to incorporate those three elements into a story and make it cohesive. Give people believable reasons for being there, motivations, and as best as can be expected. Obviously, it was a college production, so it was what it was. But the bottom line was, the story became what it had to be because we set out the criteria for the criteria was given us what elements needed to be in there, and we had to build a story around it. So unless you go into something like Snow White and say, we need to have these elements, or we don't want these elements in here, remove these elements and figure out a way for the story to work without them, or add these elements in and figure out a way to make them work, you don't end up with what we got in 2025, I don't think. Because it doesn't flow. It's like you're trying to reroute a river. The river's flowing this way. All you need to do is expand it. All you need to do is kind of knock out, some of the stuff, undam a certain part of it, cut some trees back, widen it out, maybe, dig a little bit along the side to broaden it to a certain degree, like expand on the river, but let it keep flowing the direction that it's already going. But then you look and you just see like all these planks of wood and stones and everything stacked up to try to divert the river this way, but it's not really dug. There was no trench dug inland, so the water's just flowing over the land thing. And then there's another kind of patchwork like rail system guard thing to push the water back over this way. It's like it just seems to be very clunky in a way to make it reroute, to make that river go in a different direction or different directions and go around this particular obstacle and over this one and under this one. And it's like, but you could have just had the river just going straight and it would have been fine. Like I don't know that what I've heard about the new Snow White has made it a more compelling story where you go, oh yeah, no, if you change that one element, it opens up this whole new dynamic. It's like, and again, it really comes down to, you're going to remake a certain movie. Not we're going to make a movie about this particular thing. Hey, we got a gal, we're setting a story back in the whatever time period thing, and there's an ousted princess, and she has to run for her life, and she makes friends that are willing to help her regain that. I feel like there's like a dozen movies that have that as the plot line. And I don't remember any of them being bad. Like, maybe they weren't compelling, but like the few that I've seen, I was like, okay, yeah, that's kind of a, go back. There's an anime for sure. At least one. I'm trying to remember. And I think she has red hair, the protagonist, where her father gets killed. She has to run for her life, and she learns the way of the sword and comes back and gets vengeance, and, meets, ragtag group along the way, but they're actual fighters. They're not vagabonds and dwarves. They're, and not that dwarves can't be, we know Lord of the Rings, they certainly can be formidable, but these dwarves are not. This is not Thorin and company, which even they weren't all that good. This is not Balin and Gimli. These are miners. And they're digging for stuff. They got pickaxes. They could probably swing them pretty well, but yeah. And interesting enough, like I said, in the 1937 version, Dopey, all the names are, as best as I can tell, unless the 1916 version actually did this, which I can't imagine they did. Walt is the one who gave them the names and personalities. Dopey being mute was not a thing in the original story. And I'm not sure why Disney made him that way. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, But in this one, it's like it leans into that particular aspect. And it's like, well, if you really can't do anything with the character, I mean, and I guess maybe, you know what, say that might be an area where you could say that would be a way that they expanded on that. Okay, Dopey, why doesn't he talk? He seems to be a happy little fellow in the 37 version. Doesn't seem to be afflicted with anything per se. He doesn't speak. And I don't know that it needed a remedy, but my understanding is Snow White gets him to speak. And I guess I would say this. That would be a nice, kind of side story. But one, there's plenty of side stories in movies that end up on the cutting room floor because they just bloat the movie. You're like, look, it's just like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about making this guy talk. Like it's not a central part. It's not a, and if you try to make it, like you have like a line story, B line story, or the A and B storyline. So it's like, okay, you've got the Queen storyline. What's going on with her? You've got Snow White's storyline and her journey. And then you've got maybe, the dwarves are, they had a cave in, so they're trying to deal with that. So you've got these three different storylines going at the same time, and they're going to resolve and maybe mix with each other and maybe help each other out or whatever. But you have these multiple storylines. If you're going to add a storyline onto what's already there and you're going to make this Dopey thing, you've got to give it enough time to breathe. You've got to get enough time to actually make sense, where it's like, what ailment needed to be overcome and how was she able to overcome that without just making it a point A to B thing. So in other words, I've got a character and my character has a fear of heights, and that's all Johnny is afraid of heights, but Anne says, come on, Johnny, let's go up in the ski lift. And Johnny goes, no, I don't want to go. And she says, yeah, let's go. And he goes, oh, and he goes with her. And then they're up in the ski lift and he's like, oh, this is awesome. What? Like he was scared to death, like scared of heights, wasn't going to do anything, can't go anywhere, is debilitated by this. We don't know why, we don't know how, there was no anything, and she just literally says, come on and do this, and he's like, okay, and suddenly it's not a problem anymore. Very few times in life I think solutions are that simple, but you can do it in any movie, you can do it anything you want. You can have somebody say, they have any fear or any problem. It's like, man, I've been trying to quit smoking for years. Hey, you know what? She takes a cigarette out of her mouth. You quit smoking. Okay. You can do that, but it's like, why even bother putting that in there if you can't flesh it out, if you can't actually make it make sense? Now, maybe, because I haven't seen it, it's possible I am missing some connective tissue there. Oh, mouth is doing weird things. We're going to wrap this up here. I didn't expect this one to be this long. Like there may be some connecting tissue there that makes it make sense. But again, I don't know if that's because you're not expanding on a problem. Like it wasn't like in the original, they're just like, well, he doesn't talk. He's afraid to talk, or he's got this problem. It was just, I think they just say he don't talk. May even say he don't talk none. I don't know. I'm trying to picturing them saying it. But that's it. And it's not like he is diminished as a character because he doesn't talk. In fact, I mean, there's something to be said for a character who can be very expressive and in a way articulate without actually speaking, where his facial expressions are more than enough to communicate. Like you may give him like a Jim Carrey type face, where it's just like that's his whole thing. Like he's not just scared, he's freaky scared. I mean, you could do fun things with that and not, but that would just be, that's his reaction. You're not actually taking time out of the movie to be like, look at his reaction. It's just like, did you notice like every single time something happened, Dopey had like the weirdest expressions? Yeah, because that's how he communicates. That's how he makes it very clear what he's thinking and feeling, or more or less clear, without being able to talk. So I don't, and maybe I missed that. Maybe that is a problem that could be solved, but it just seemed like things were added on and things were taken away, not because it made sense in adapting this story, bringing this story to life, but because there was a checklist to go by. There were things when they sat down, here's how we need to change the story. Here's how we want to reshape and reform the story. Here's how we want to divert the river. Here's how we're going to go kind of against the grain's going this way. We're going to be going this way a little bit, but we're going to try to sand it that way so that it seems like the grain's kind of going that way, but it really doesn't. And I think it's to the detriment of the story. And, but you know, that's as far as I'll go with that. It swapped out, from what I can tell. It seemed to kind of swap out, and not only swapped out, but seemed to have disdain for a fundamental, relatable experience, which is yearning and longing for love, the envy, and how it can amasticize and get worse and consume you. If you watch the first video, you know the queen wasn't just angry. I mean, it describes her envy. It describes like the twisting of her gut. It makes it very visceral just how consuming this thing was. And we can relate to that, or we know somebody who can. Like these are virtues and flaws that we can all understand, appreciate, bemoan, celebrate. What they created, what they made it into, not only is devoid of most of that, but it now goes in a different direction that has almost no resonance and no credibility. And yeah, sorry, this came off. You know what? I mean, I've got an opinion. I can't help it. But again, it's not my intent to say, oh, this is stupid. From a creative standpoint, I try to figure out why choices were made, with the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I could tell you right now why I think choices were made, but that's not the point. I'm not trying to create that issue. I'm just going like, here's why, from a creative aspect, this boggles me. And as I was hoping, I think it's very easy to see if you read the 1819 version and you watch the 1937 version, you can see everything makes sense. Why things were dropped, why things were added, why things were expanded upon. And it wasn't like crazy different. The witch in that one, she still meets her end. In the 1916 version, it sounds like she loses her beauty and then just goes off somewhere. 1916, or the Disney version, brings it back to the original, where she does die. She's just not tortured to death. She meets a grisly death from falling from above, and is apparently eaten by vultures. They kind of circle around, and that's the last we see of her, or what's inferred that happens to her. And that's enough, you know. So it does have a grisly aspect. It doesn't go hardcore with the bring me her lungs and liver and I'm going to eat them, but it does say give me her heart. So it keeps some elements and takes some away to go, okay, let's not go crazy with the gore and the scariness here, because we're celebrating Snow. We're not fixated on the queen and her hang-ups and her problems. We're going to be focused on Snow White and her beauty and beauty of character. Because when I say beauty, it's like, it's just as much how she moves as just, because honestly, Snow White, I'll say this as a character, like their drawings are capable of being, you can draw a very attractive young lady. You can draw, and I'm not even talking like in any kind of sexualized way. I just literally mean the way you draw the eyes, the way they blink, the way the guy, the way they, draw the guys, everything. You can create characters that have an appeal or an attraction to them, or attractiveness to them, even in very basic drawings. Why was I talking about that? Basic drawings, attractiveness. Lost the thought completely. It was going to be good too, folks. Sorry, I want to try to reclaim it here, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Oh boy. Attraction. I don't want to edit this either. That's kind of thing. I just wanted to get these out, get them out of my head and get them out, and not belabor the point. But I am kind of belaboring the point. So I guess that'll just have to go. By the way, so it's something about the characters can be attractive or good looking. I double tangent it. I took a tangent and then I immediately jumped on another tangent before I fleshed out that second tangent. I have to go a few sentences with that second tangent, otherwise I forget. It's like it gets overwritten by the new tangent. So anyway, we'll just leave it at that. From a creative standpoint, going okay. Right. Okay, hang on. Creative standpoint, we go back to looking at them, they extrapolated on the original concepts, said, okay, we're not going to make it bloody and gory because it's for a broader audience. We'll take your heart, but not your liver and your lungs. Oh, goodness gracious. Sorry. You can fast forward through this for a little bit. I'll make a big hand gesture when I figure it out. Like I said, I just want to put this out there and not have to do any editing. I'm a little lazy. Sorry. It's been a long day. I've been doing this for 6 hours now. They took it. We were able to see that Disney took the 1812 and brought it out, fleshed it out in the direction that it was going, or the direction that was already laid out, and carried that on to the next logical place. Okay, screw it. I'll just end with that. The reason I did this was the reason I went back and read the original was to go, okay, how much was changed and why? To understand better and to compare to what was changed and why in the 2025 version. And so while I can understand the changes that were made from the original story itself to the 1937 animation version, I don't understand the outright changes. We're not even talking about expansion, the changes that were made to the 2025 version. And just to reiterate, because that is the one thing I will say that goes beyond the scope of just the films, the idea that a woman wanting to be loved, an idea of a woman just, okay, I'm just gonna work at this house. I'm just gonna tend house for the dwarves. Gonna enjoy being out here in the woods, away from everything, and for now that's my life. That's not the end of the world. That's not a bad thing. It's not a down on women or on a life at all. If a guy, same thing happened to a guy. If a young prince fled out and had the same issue, or had the same thing happen, that would be fine. But I'm still in my brain. I'm still trying to remember what the heck I was talking about. Like, why was I talking about drawing, animating? Like, now I just want to stop the video, go back and hear what I said before I said it, but I'm not going to do that because it needs to end. Anyway, so that's it. Thank you so much for watching, bearing with me through all this. It's totally fizzling out right now, but yeah, that's that. So hopefully you learned a little something. I learned a lot about the original. And like I said, I'll be making a video, not like this. It'll be an actual produced video with footage and everything of comparing Little Mermaid and Aladdin. What I consider to be, Aladdin and Little Mermaid considered to be some of the best and worst of modern Disney, respectively, that's come out, and why, and the contrast between the characters and the stories of each. But that's a little ways in the future. This was just something that came to my mind, and I thought I would talk about it. Well, it seems to have some kind of relevance. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. If you watched all three, again, encourage you to watch the other two. If something I said here doesn't make sense, or you want to find out more, I'm not trying to hawk the first two videos, but there is more context in there. We explore it quite a bit more before we leave here. So anyway, thanks so much for your time. Take care. Have a great day.